We have in the studio Professor Kojo Gavua. He is the Dean, School of Arts, the University of Ghana, and also Director for International Relations and Cultural Diplomacy at the Ghana Institute of Governance and Security. We're very glad to have you in the studio. We'll also be joined by Dr. Vladimir Ntwidanso. He's a Senior Research Fellow, the Legon Center for International Affairs and Diplomacy. And as and when we get the other related parties, we would also want to speak to them, especially a representative from the West African Network for Peace Building. The Nigerian elections seem to have gained a lot more momentum, especially following that very initial postponement that was announced some 6 weeks ago. And tomorrow is election day. Do you think that the governing PDP party and the ACP may have closed their ranks as far as smoking a peace pipe or removing all doubt of disagreement among them, as you tend to observe and do the analysis?
Well, the leaders of the two parties have come into agreement to curb violence, or not to promote violence. That is on paper. That is the formal agreement. But the two parties go beyond the leadership. And what is going on underground within the parties is different. So, yes, we generally, in our part of the world, look up to leadership. And leadership influences much of what we do. So, well, to some extent, we would say that once the leaders have come into agreement, there's an accord for them to not foment violence. Some members of the various parties would take cognizance of that and minimize whatever they do. And it's a hope.
Anyway,
that goes on, yeah.
So, but looking at what the precedent has been in terms of the rancor and sometimes the atmosphere that tends to characterize elections in Nigeria, would you say you can have your best bet that they will all respect whatever tenets they are in those moratoriums?
Nigeria, it's a populous nation. The most populous, at least 170 million people. And what I wouldn't want us to keep on propagating, it's as if Nigeria is naturally violent. They've had their challenges in the 70s, and that has made many of them to be aggressive in their approach to life. But it does not necessarily mean that Nigeria is a violent nation. Within such a populous nation, you still have elements that succumb to violence, but we can't attribute that to Nigeria. Our thinking today should be that there should be peace in Nigeria, because whatever happens in Nigeria has a bearing on us in the sub-region, West African sub-region, because it has the biggest economy, it has the largest population, and Nigeria, as it were, today, does not encompass only Nigerians. We have people from all the different nations across West Africa and beyond living in Nigeria and are considered Nigerians, just as we have Nigerians who have naturalized as Ghanaians today. So if there is peace in Nigeria, that would also stimulate peace in the sub-region. So we must rather be positive with regard to peace and not to keep on hammering on the violence, the negative aspect of Nigeria. Nigeria necessarily, not necessarily, but you see, when you have a large population like that, some people will definitely go wayward. And when it happens, it's not because leadership is promoting that or the parties, the two major parties, really want their supporters to go violent. And the same thing pertains to Ghana.
We've been joined on the line by Dr. Vladimir Ntwidanso, a Senior Research Fellow, the Legon Center for International Affairs and Diplomacy. And a very good morning to you, sir, and thanks for joining us. Now,
good morning.
Okay, my name is Roland. And if you tend to monitor international media, you get the sense that, well, a lot is expected, but also some anticipation that it could go haywire in terms of either being violence or some rancorous situations being reported in many respects. Do you think that is fair on the country Nigeria?
Well, that's a fair assessment. Basically, elections in our part of the world are fraught with all kinds of corruption, one way or the other, corruption in the broadest sense of the word, that because of the patronage system, politics has become a zero-sum game. And particularly in Nigeria, where none of the elections have been seen as very fair and free, there is the apprehension that anything can happen, more so that Boko Haram has become a variable in the determination of what happens in the election. And I tell you, the patronage system in African politics will never allow free and fair elections in Africa. I can't imagine how free and fair the Nigerian elections would go. One of your panelists was talking about the very fact that it may not be the leadership which want to have such an untoward thing. But I'm thinking that leadership has a big role to play and make sure that politics is not a zero-sum game, and that whoever wins rules Nigeria and not his political party. But because of the patronage system, we are all fearing that Nigeria is not going to have a very free and fair election. That is the fear of everybody.
All right. We know that pacts have been signed, or if we can say moratoriums have been signed, and some agreements, so to speak, to comport as far as both sides are concerned. How do you think the postponement of the election from 6 weeks ago to tomorrow could play in the hands of either parties?
Well, for me, and I've said it a million times, it was very good it was postponed. Because first and foremost, more than 20 million people would have been disenfranchised if the elections were held some 6 weeks ago. 20 million of the cards had not been distributed. At the same time, Boko Haram was at the height of its, basic way of doing things. Now that they have been diffused one way or the other, not completely eliminated, I think elections will be fair one way or the other. And secondly, the 20 million cards that have now been distributed will go a long way to change fortunes one way or the other.
Okay.
So as for me, the postponement was good, and it doesn't have to play to or to the benefit of any one of the candidates.
Okay.
If anything at all, I was in Nigeria quite recently, and what I saw was that the postponement had sapped the energies of Buhari. Buhari was quiet throughout the week that I was in Nigeria. Probably the timing of the whole thing was such that he would have exhausted his resources by the time the elections were to be held. That is the only thing I saw. Other than that, I don't think it would inure specifically to the benefit of any one of the candidates.
Well, we have in the studio your colleague, Professor Kojo Gavois, and we would also want him to contribute. As we know that you don't have much time, though, but as you stay on the line, now your colleague, Dr. Vladimir Chudanso, is saying, looking at how the momentum has been built, either way, all of them would have been exhausted. But on social media, and especially on the international media, you get to see pictures of doling out of monies, and just like the way we see in other West African elections that are organized, even including Ghana, money's being given out. All these are supposed to be vote-buying mechanisms or to influence voters. Is that it?
That would be the thinking of those who are doling out money. But the Nigerian people are becoming discerning. They have gone through a lot of experiences. So it's possible they could take your money but still not vote for you, because they will think and reflect upon their lives as individuals and as groups. And so the money would go around, and that is the thinking of many of our politicians, which is wrong anyway. But that is what they think, like as if politics is a game, and that people or the citizenry of our nations are not discerning enough. Once you give them money, it's like you starve people to an extent, and once you dangle fried fish, if they don't take time, they will throw up their jaws. It's the kind of thing we do during political electioneering campaigns, and especially towards the D-Day for voting. It's happening in Nigeria, but it does not necessarily mean that that would influence the votes of the majority of the people.
Dr. Vladimir Chudanso, how discerning do you think the average Nigerian voter is, to the point that we can conclude that they have become discerning enough to ward off whatever influences that may be coming from either side?
Well, let's get it straight. For once, I would like to differ from my colleague. Politics in Africa is such that money plays a very important role in the determination of the results. no matter how discerning people are, I mean, how discerning our Ghanaians be, I mean, I'm always saying that when you see the T-shirts being thrown around and money is being thrown around and that kind of thing, it has its own socio-psychological impact on the person who has taken the money. And so a few people, yes, Chidanso, Gavua and others, if you give me the money, I may use the money all right, but I will vote for the person I want to vote. But majority of the African, the average African, the average Nigerian, the average Ghanaian is still so ignorant about issues that once the party has given him something, and once there is somebody forcing him to vote one way or the other, they would still vote. They wouldn't look at exactly what the parameters for measuring a good government is. So in Nigeria specifically, I tell you, money rules. If you know how much money is splashed around, if you know how much money is used in influencing the thoughts of people, and then other variables like tribalism, other variables like, I mean, all kinds of religion and that sort of thing come into interplay. I've always said that this is the time for African intellectuals to sit up and work out something more appropriate for African governance. Other than that, anything untoward derails everything that we have had over the past years. Money is still a variable in the determination of the results of African governance.
How does that tend to perhaps portray Africa, and we have the biggest economy in Nigeria, to the international community?
It portrays us in the bad light. And you know what? As soon as money plays that role, governance itself becomes very bad. The people have to recoup their money. They will have to be profligate enough. They will have to be overspending, physical indiscipline. Therefore, there is a pervasive balance of payment deficit. Nothing goes well. I will be bold enough to tell you that this is what is happening in Ghana. Either parties believe in the patronage system, and once they win, they will have to be profligate enough to be able to recoup the money back. Institutions of state are belted under the hypnosis of the governing body, and nothing goes on well in the perfect sense of good governance. It is in Africa pervasively, and it is in Nigeria, it is in Ghana. Better find a way of making elections more authentic, in the sense that when you go and you vote, you are voting correct.
It is possible. I hope I'm not wrong if I conclude you've become emotional about it, especially when money...
I'm very, very emotional about that. I'm very, very emotional.
Well,
and my writings show that I'm very emotional. I can't see why through fraudulent means somebody comes to rule. And because he has come fraudulently, he fraudulently uses state institutions, state resources and everything in order to make governance like a kind of political game. When we could have ruled ourselves in such a way that we have a very good country. Nigeria is a very good country with all the resources. Go 10 kilometers outside Lagos, and you see the size of poverty. You know, so it's a little devastating when you know the thing and you see that the wrong thing is being done.
Professor Gavua, not only has Goodluck Jonathan hemorrhaged a lot more support since he came in 2011, but we've seen the last year being characterized with chants of "we want a change" in Nigeria. And so you have opposition parties rallying support behind General Buhari of the ACP. How is that going to influence the outcome when we know that the last 6 weeks has seen a certain momentum being built by the incumbent PDP?
Yes, since '99 the incumbent has been in power, and Buhari Goodluck Jonathan has come in at the tail end of it. So in that light, many people appear to be tired of the same style of governance.
From the same party.
From the same party. That is one point. Now many are talking about corruption, issues of corruption in Nigeria. And the second thing is the lack of venom, or I would say strength, on the part of government to curb violence, especially emanating from Boko Haram's activities. So those two key issues, corruption and security, are on the minds of Nigerians. Those could be the immediate causes of why people are joining forces against the government, but also because people may be tired of the same style of leadership for a very long time. However, being in power for such a long time also gives some clout to the ruling party. They have entrenched themselves, they have specialized in ways by which they could convince and influence people to rally for them. That is what my colleague was talking about in terms of doling out money and money rules. But what I want to say is that we should not think that the cognitive structures of Africans or the way we think in our countries is frozen in time and space. We are also bound to change our thinking processes based on the experiences.
I was like, well, how about the argument that we haven't gotten there yet, where even though we have our cognitive strength or IQs being straight, we can't be influenced by whatever variables. And this time, you heard, you heard Professor Entry also talking about how money is very influential.
When are we getting there? That is the question. When shall we get there if we don't start making the effort towards that direction? You see, we can't just accept the fact that Africans will never change. Okay, things will never change in Africa. We are normal human beings. We are also going around. We are listening to news from elsewhere. We are observing whatever goes on elsewhere. And from our own experiences, we have realized that people who shared money to us go into power and don't think about us. They think about themselves. So all these processes would consciously or unconsciously affect the way we look at those who are coming in with money, with power today. That is why I'm saying that we should be hammering on the positive elements, the hope that things would change in Africa, and not to accept the status quo.
Boko Haram, how has it hurt Nigeria so much to the point where it has hurt its political reputation and even its electoral structure?
Boko Haram has hurt Nigeria to the extent that it's Nigeria in particular, because it's taken away a lot of people. So many people have died. Over 11,000 people have died as a result of the activities of Boko Haram. Okay, it has also shown that the Nigerian, it creates the impression that the Nigerian government is not strong enough or doesn't have the willpower, the political will to deal with this violence inflicted on the country by Boko Haram. However, Boko Haram's activities in Nigeria is not about Nigeria alone. To me, I see it as a way of destabilizing Nigeria, which is the most powerful economy in the sub-region and the most populous nation in the sub-region with a lot of political influence. So once Nigeria gets destabilized, then people can have access to its resources, particularly the oil resources. So Boko Haram's activities is not just about Nigeria alone. It has negative impact on all of us.
Professor Danso, are you there?
Yes, I'm around.
Okay, Boko Haram, to the point where they have captured towns, even though some of them have been recaptured by government forces, and people can move freely, etc. How can that have an influence on how well the opposition performs?
Well, it has influence on how well each other party performs, because in those enclaves where Boko Haram is very active, voter turnout to be very low to start with. And again, let us not make the mistake of thinking that Boko Haram has been dispersed, and therefore that's the end of the matter. The more you hit a terrorist, the more it becomes dispersed in one way and more dangerous, like a starfish. I tell you, on the day of elections, that's tomorrow, we should expect some skirmishes from far away areas, that's in the south, in the east, northwest, and other places, where you would least expect the presence of Boko Haram. And that's how the terrorists work. And so Nigerian security must be very much alert in all the territory of Nigeria, because Boko Haram will strike again. Trust me, they will. Because they always want that kind of instability. They always want that kind of surprise to say that we are here. And so I wouldn't say their presence or non-presence would inure to the benefit of either party. It will have effect on the elections generally. Voter turnout is going to be lower in very many places because of Boko Haram. And well, that will affect the results one way or the other.
You saying that it will affect all is giving me a new direction for questioning, because I had always thought, based on my reading, that, well, the ACP, because of General Buhari and the subjects that we always tend to play around with in Africa in our elections, that the issue of ethnicity, tribalism, and also regionalism is going to have a lot more of the vote. I'm talking about General Buhari. But if Boko Haram is in the north and has a lot more supremacy up there and captured communities, etc., it means that the SCP is going to be the most affected. Are my conclusions right?
Well, you may conclude that way. You may be right. You may be wrong. The point is that it's only a situation where Boko Haram is aligned to Buhari that you would think that they would support a Buhari candidature. But here is a group whose origins and everything show that they want an African caliphate, something I don't think Buhari subscribes to. So they have no respect for that ethnicity. It is purely a kind of religious fanaticism. And I do not think they like Buhari more than they like any other person. Their cause is completely different. And they would want to disrupt anything which is state-wise. And that is what terrorism does. They hate the norm, and they will always disturb the norm. And they hate all forms of sanity. And so I do not think they would want Buhari to win, and then their status would change. No. I strongly suspect that they are in an organization that is not looking for a president who will support their cause. I don't think that's what they are looking for.
Okay, but ethnicity is always a card that's been played, Professor Gavua. Do you think ethnicity will play a role here?
Definitely to play a major role in Nigerian politics, as in politics everywhere in the sub-region, because this is something which we have inherited, unfortunately, and we've inherited from our colonial past, and something which many people have internalized, okay, for good and bad reasons. Okay, they've internalized it. So definitely it will play. But when you look at the political landscape of Nigeria today, there are many in the South who would also want Buhari to win, not because of an ethnicity or religion, but because they are simply tired of the system of governance that they are experiencing today. So ethnicity is one of the variables, a key variable that would influence the elections in Nigeria. But it's saying there are many in the North too who may be sympathetic to Boko Haram's cause, and that may not vote because they are Northerners, because according to Buhari's campaign message, that he would make sure he kills the terrorist insurgents in Nigeria. Otherwise, Nigeria dies. And so some may be afraid that once Buhari comes into power, it's going to make sure that, yes, Boko Haram is out. And how is he going to do that? Additional violence from the states, and then Boko Haram as a terrorist group would also, so it will continue. On the other hand, as I mentioned, ethnicity is something we would like to wish away, but which will not happen as early as we think it should happen, because we've internalized it, unfortunately. And it's for us today, especially the intellectuals of the sub-region, to start educating and re-educating our minds about the negative impact of ethnicity on our economies and on governance.
Dr. Danso?
Yes, please.
Okay, before my last question to you, so that we can leave you and you go and see to your activities that you have scheduled for the morning. Through Professor Goodluck Jonathan, we've been told that Nigeria, after rebasing, is the largest economy in Africa. Of course, there's the argument about it not being equitably spread, etc. But over 500 billion worth of an economy is one to be proud about. Do you think that under Goodluck Jonathan and subsequently under the PDP, we've seen economic transformation subsequently in Nigeria?
Well, before I answer that directly, let me go back to what my friend was saying. Look, in African politics, and specifically in Nigeria, three variables:
right,
ethnicity, religion, and money. In between them, have an interplay in determining who governs and who doesn't govern. Ethnicity, religion, and money. And that will play very well in Nigeria too. No two ways about that. Now, directly to your question, it doesn't mean anything when your economy is said to be the largest in Africa or the lowest in Africa. It doesn't mean anything when 40% of that this thing, whatever level you have, it does not belong to the state. You can imagine how much Nigerian oil does not belong to Nigeria because they are siphoned just like that. You can imagine how much corruption is in Nigeria to the extent that, I mean, it's mind-boggling how Nigeria is so much well-resourced, so much positioned to become the, whatever, Switzerland of Africa, and yet Nigeria is immersed in poverty to the extent that at a point in time they would want IMF bailouts and things like that. So it depends on really how we build our system building, a system that would really sustain itself and drive away poverty, bring about infrastructure development, and bring about industrialization. We are not seeing that in Nigeria yet. So the fact that they have rebased Nigeria's economy and say it's the biggest in Africa means nothing. A small economy like Burkina Faso, if they are able to put their stakes very well and build well, will be better than a Nigeria which has a bigger base. And I can give you an example of Singapore, which some time ago had the highest GDP per capita in the world in the 80s. America was there, but Singapore had the highest per capita, followed by Switzerland at that point. So it doesn't mean anything to the ordinary man. It doesn't mean anything to Nigerians if the economy is so big and under Goodluck Jonathan we rebase it and we got this thing. Governance in Africa is bereft of real exposure of the energies of the people towards development. And that is what we should be thinking about.
Well, thank you very much. Senior Research Fellow, Legon Center for International Affairs, and Dr. Vladimir Chudanso has been joining us for our discussions. And now we come back to you in the studio, Professor Gavua. The economy, shouldn't it be part of analysis when we're saying we want to determine who has performed better or who will do better in terms of add-ons?
Yes, it should be a major variable. But understanding Vladimir, it's that it doesn't really matter what is on paper, the biggest economy, okay, does that translate into improvement in the living conditions of the majority of peoples in the various countries? I said that is the essence of it. When those who ascribe to and win political power amass the wealth, okay, to the detriment of the conditions of the other peoples in the nations, then the economy as on paper does not really matter. But the point is that, is Africa free? It's West Africa. Let me narrow it down to West Africa. Is West Africa free and autonomous and independent of the whole world in terms of the economy? Not at all. We are in an entangled world. We have been entangled in the world system, world economic system, since pre-colonial times, through colonial times. And today, many of those who have invested in Africa are derived from the same groups of people that enslaved us, that colonized us. They have repackaged themselves into various institutions that come today claiming to be partners, okay, to assist us overcome our economic challenges. The same thing can be found in Nigeria. The same thing can be found in Ghana. And so when we talk about corruption, corruption is not just an African phenomenon. It's not unique to Africa. It's an interplay of things that happen across the world, including our neighbors of the world who are purporting to be working with us, or who purport to be working with us, or who sometimes come in to be working with us. So we cannot isolate that. Economy plays a major role. It influences the mindset of people because, as we identified earlier, those who have money are able to influence the ideas of people and their social relations within our economies. So yes, we cannot wish away the economy. It is an important factor, but it is not a key factor in determining how we improve our conditions.
The interpretation of how influential the development of the economy is as a benchmark for determining who becomes a leader in an African country, has that been influenced by perhaps the lack thereof of adequate literacy levels in the communities?
Literacy level is one thing, but to be educated is different from being literate. That is why we have several uneducated intellectuals. People may be literate, they know how to read and write, they have letters behind their names, but are they really educated with regard to what is happening to us as Africans? There are many who may not be literate, but have economic power. Let's take Ghana, for example. When you go to Makola Market, There are many people there who know how to balance their accounts and have been balancing it for a very long time and have taken care of many people today in the country. You have leadership comprising of intellectuals. What have we been able to show in terms of managing the economy of Ghana? So literacy is one thing, but being educated in terms of our conditions of lives, it's another level at all. So literacy, yes, may play a key role in this, but that is not the only determinant factor. The point is those who control money control power, and it is their ideas and social relations which influence the rest of us negatively.
In a letter this week, the UK Prime Minister David Cameron urged Goodluck Jonathan to make sure that there's a sense of reassuring of all parties of acceptance of the results of the elections, because well, the international community is skeptical. There's also a suspicion that neither party appears well suited to perhaps embrace the trauma of defeat or the atmosphere that will come with a defeat. And there are fears there could be some disagreement that will result to some clashes or to the point of some rancor.
Yes, David Cameron's letter is one thing. Defeat is painful, okay? Even if it is in soccer or anywhere, defeat is painful and people react differently, okay? People may even contest defeat. So that will not be unexpected in the Nigerian case. There will be people who would contest the results, no matter how it goes. However, that should not be a condition for the future of Nigeria. Goodluck Jonathan may say, yes, we'll do our possible best to ensure that everybody accepts the results. But is he the only one in charge of the PDP? He's not the only one in charge of PDP. And he's not the one who controls PDP. PDP has been there before Goodluck Jonathan assumed its leadership. So it's something about the generality of the parties, the two parties there, and from the constituency level all the way to the federal level. So the letter is good, but let Nigerians themselves determine how they want their future to go politically, although we have the international partners also wishing that we have a good results. But the Nigerian election is not for the international community, it is for Nigerians first.
Okay, so what should be the posture of both parties as they head towards the polls tomorrow?
The posture is that they should all expect to win. When you are in a contest, everyone would expect to win. But defeat, though painful, we must learn to accept defeat and to say that, yes, better luck next time. And for now, let's think about the country. But when they have personal interest beyond that of the national interest, that is when violence will come in. So I would say that for now, let us start thinking about the national interest rather than the individual personal interest of Nigeria. And once we reflect over that, we'll ensure that violence is minimized.
We've seen international observer groups move into the country. I think even one team is led by former President John Kufuor, etc. What roles would they be playing? Because if we were to be in Ghana, we would say, oh, well, we would accept. And these days, we don't even have a lot more of the missions here because our election is supposed to be now very transparent in many respects. What will be the role of the various observer missions?
The various observer missions would be in Nigeria to observe, to come out with their verdict, whether or not the elections have been fair or not unfair to people. But they are not in there to influence the voting patterns of people. They cannot control violence when it happens. They cannot control rigging. Okay, they can only observe that there has been rigging. So they can come out with their reports, but will their report be acceptable to whoever wins or loses? We have had the same experience in Zimbabwe some time ago. We had observers there, but did that affect the outcome of the election? So by all means, the observers will be there to do their work, and it will be on paper. But it is up to the Nigerians themselves, especially the two major parties involved, to say, let's accept whatever report comes out of the observer mission's observation in Nigeria. So yes, they should be there, but they can only babysit for now.
And the media, what role do they have to play from now to perhaps election?
I think the role of the media in Nigeria and across the sub-region is to emphasize peace and not to emphasize the aspect that there's likelihood to be violence in Nigeria and keep on hammering that. The more you talk about violence, the more it sticks to the minds of people. But when we talk about peace and the need for peace as a means to attaining economic independence in the sub-region, I think that can also go down with many Nigerians. So for now, let the media encourage people to accept the results and live as brothers and sisters within the country. I think that is the message which we should be churning out today.
The West African sub-region, we know ECOWAS is a sub-regional body, etc. How ready should the countries be? Already we know, of course, there are countries where we have influx of Nigerians in there who are resident really as migrants, etc. What should we be expecting, just in case something else?
What we should be expecting is good leadership in Nigeria. So whoever wins would entail that that is the person Nigerians have chosen. And we should be ready to work with that leadership. We should be ready to accept Nigeria after tomorrow's election. Whoever wins is the leadership that we have to work with in the sub-region, and we must respect that leadership once Nigerians themselves accept the leadership. And we should not be in a position to support one side against the other because we keep each other. Whatever happens, if there's violence in Nigeria, refugees would flock into our nations, and that will have an impact on our economies. So we should just expect that, yes, there should be peace in Nigeria, the voting should go peacefully, and the result should be accepted. And once the result is accepted in Nigeria, we should all be prepared to work cordially with the ruling government.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Kojo Gavua. He is the Dean for the School of Arts, the University of Ghana, and also Director for International Relations and Cultural Diplomacy, the Ghana Institute of Governance and Security, GIGS. And thanks for joining me this morning. We've also had online Dr. Vladimir Ntredanso, a Senior Research Fellow for the Legon Center for International Affairs and Diplomacy. And he also gave us incisive contributions on the subject of Nigeria and how the country is preparing for the elections from tomorrow. And also we say thank you very much for joining us for the day's edition of the AM show. We'll be with you same time on Monday, and we say do enjoy the weekend and always stay glued here. We'll give you the best updates as far as the Nigerian election is concerned and other main topical current affairs issues are.